Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm reviewing the first 3 episodes of We Own This City on HBO. So We Own This City is based on a book by a Baltimore Sun reporter. It tells the story of corruption in the Baltimore Police Department, how it began and how it kind of was pervasive through the early 2000s all the way up until today. And it really does show a very all-inclusive story of the events that kind of led up to the things that happened with Freddie Gray and everything that pretty much all the bad things that were happening down the city. So I'll have to say right away, I am from the Baltimore area. I was born down there in Johns Hopkins. I grew up in that area. I was a little bit older. I moved to southern Pennsylvania, but I spent a ton of weekends, a ton of time down in Baltimore and the surrounding areas. And the show actually is filmed down in Baltimore. And I think that's something that really adds to it. It definitely feels like a spiritual successor to The Wire. A lot of people have said that. The Wire is, in my opinion, one of the best shows ever made. And this show really does capture Baltimore and kind of the people that live in that area. Definitely adds to the authenticity of the story. The fact that they film down there captures the essence of the city. And you have a lot of the landmarks. They reference all the different locations down there. Jon Bernthal plays Sergeant Wayne Jenkins. And one of the things I will say about this show is that when you're watching it, you really have to pay attention, because one of the pros of the show, in my opinion, is also a con in a way, and that's the storytelling. So it jumps back and forth in time between the early 2000s, when he's coming onto the police force, and you're really seeing his corruption, how moving through the years and as it continues, it becomes more and more corrupt. You see how this corruption is very pervasive into the entire department, particularly the gun trace task force. And one of the things that the show does is it uses these police reports and these dispatch notes to show kind of the timeline and where it's going. So jump back to the early 2000s and Wayne Jenkins and how he's being morphed and changed, and how the police department as a whole is changing, becoming more and more corrupt. They're deciding to, instead of, actually police the community, they're kind of oppressing the community. They're finding ways to pin people with, kind of lower level crimes just to get the numbers up, to make things look better politically. And they start to steal money. They start to plant things. It really just shows how, this corruption of power can really take place. And definitely Baltimore was a city that, still has problems today, but obviously had a ton of problems not that long ago. And you get to see kind of a deep dive into how that corruption can even come from the top bottom and from the bottom up. But like I said, that's one of the things that may make the show a little confusing, because it jumps backwards and forwards in time a lot in the same episodes. It's following kind of 3 different storylines. You have the gun task force, Jon Bernthal's character. You also have, a DOJ investigation. You have an FBI investigation. You have a lot of moving parts that are constantly moving back and forth, and it doesn't really necessarily tell you what timeline you're in. You just have to really be paying attention. But I think by doing that, it does show this decay of the Baltimore Police Department, how it got to be where it was, what led up to the uprising in Baltimore and everything that happened along the way. It's very intriguing. You really are captivated by the story and what's happening, but you really do have to pay attention. And how I mentioned that corruption can come from the bottom up or the top down, you do get to see that in the show. I actually surprisingly have a degree from Towson University just outside Baltimore in political science. So as they dive into the political facets of the show and not just the beat cops and the things that are going wrong on the street, it's the directives coming from above, the politicians that really only care about statistics. They necessarily don't really even care about the community and how policing is being done. They don't care if policing is done legally or correctly. They just want the numbers. They just want to have arrests. They just want to have, drugs and guns off the street, even if that means maybe doing things in the wrong way. And I think the show captures that really well. I think it captures the political side with the police chief, the mayor, the election going on, but then also we'll dive down to the beat cop and what they go through and how maybe they could become corrupted, and how the whole system is kind of flawed as a whole, and how a metro area with the big shuffling of all these big parties involved, kind of the people get lost in it, the actual policing gets lost in it. Because at the end of the day, the story does emphasize that, police are important, policing is important, they can really help a community, but then how it can be used in other ways for corruption, for greed, for all the things that are bad in the same community. It's interesting how they decide to tell the story, but I think it really does hit the nail on the head with having these 3 different levels of storytelling. The acting is really solid. I think Jon Bernthal is good because he is someone that you're seeing change throughout the story. He's playing a person that's obviously a deeply troubled person, and how that can keep, going further and further and getting deeper and deeper. And I think the fact that it's a real life story and a real life situation makes it far more compelling than anything of maybe we've seen in the past. I do love The Shield and other shows like that, but when it's a real story, it feels far more grounded. There's not totally ridiculous moments happening in the show. It's real people with real consequences, and it dives in to how maybe things that you don't even think are a real consequence, how something could be a a harmless crime. It actually could have huge consequences for the people involved. So far, I have really enjoyed the first 3 episodes. It definitely keeps building upon itself. I don't feel like it's slowing down. It's ratcheting up the tension. You feel all these parties coming together, maybe the events that are going to lead up to what we've seen happen in Baltimore in the past, and just how everything comes together, how you have the Department of Justice, you have the FBI, you have these beat cops, you have different counties that are investigating Baltimore and this corruption and everything that's happening in the community. And it's all coming together to like a powder keg type situation like we did see happen back then. So I'll be interested to see how the story moves along. The acting, like I said, is solid. I really am excited to see how they decide to tell the narrative, how they decide to tell the story, what happened. Obviously, I know it's based off a book from a writer for the Baltimore Sun, so it's going to have a lot of that great detail. It has those first-hand accounts. It isn't someone telling the story as a producer or someone who just wants to make a movie. It's made hand in hand with someone who went through it, someone who lived there, someone who experienced it, and it being filmed there, I think hits home that much harder, at least for me. So I'm really interested to see how it goes moving forward. So if you checked out We Own the City, let me know what you think about it. Are you enjoying it as much as I am? How does it feel to you compared to The Wire? Obviously, I love The Wire, but it's an older show. This feels far newer. This feels obviously the shiny new show that comes out. But it's dealing with, I feel, some really topical issues, and it's dealing with it in a way that isn't too, I don't know how to say, maybe preachy or too over the top. It really is going into how these things happen, how the systemic failure can come about, and how it can continue to grow if it isn't put in check. It's really interesting to see a case study of something that I lived through, something that I was there. I was in the city when these things were happening and understanding where it was going, and it's really intriguing to me. And like I said, I can't wait to see where it goes. So again, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.